Lovely. Welcome, Anne. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to my new friend and a very special astrologer from long, long ago, who's going to come and chat with us today about what's going on and try and figure out what is actually going on. And Anne Barr, welcome. Now you're all the way from Ireland, which is really fun. We've just had a really lovely conversation now to try and see what we could fix in the ways of the world, and maybe we can share that with the viewers here. Can you just take
Yeah,
a
thank you
few
so
minutes?
much.
Yeah, lovely. So great to have you. And I'd really love you to just share a little bit of your astrological journey with the viewers and let them know your history of decades and decades of working with astrology in lots of countries as well. So please
Yeah,
do introduce yourself.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's fairly checkered history, but I I got interested in astrology because someone did my chart. That happens to a lot of people. When I was 30, now I'm 69. Um, and that was in Ireland. I was living in a community, and the woman I was sharing a boat with at the time, we were living on a boat, she started studying astrology with the Astrological Lodge in London. And I just got fascinated. And, when you live on a boat with someone, you learn what they're learning because there isn't space to not to. And I went to a few meetings at the Astrological Lodge in London, and they were
So is
fascinating.
that the Liz Green crowd and the
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it
lucky
was.
you.
Yeah,
Mm.
I didn't know anything about
Yeah.
anything to do with
Sounds
astrology
like
at the
you were
time.
there at the peak. Yeah.
It was amazing. And once they picked my friend, who'd had a very interesting life, for their magical mystery tour, where they have four very well known astrologers stand up on a stage in front of hundreds of astrologers. And all they have is the date and time of, in this case, my friend's birth, and whether it's male or female. And that's all they know.
Hmm.
And then they give their versions of what this person is like, etc. And the information was mind blowing.
Well,
I mean, I knew her very, very well, so I knew how accurate they were. But like the color of her eyes, her mother's
wow.
her
I
mother's
don't know that technique.
miscarriages, yeah, the miscarriages that her mother had before she was born.
Hmm.
I mean, details that you think, I mean, I still don't know how to get that information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I was extremely impressed. And then I started studying. And that it was a hobby. I never thought of it as anything but a hobby.
Yes, it always
And
starts out as a hobby, doesn't it?
yeah, and an obsession, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the people around me were interested in having their charts done. So I had lots of people to experiment on. So that was good fun. And then I moved to South America, and I was staying with a friend in Bogota. And I said, "Oh, do you want your chart done?" Because she was being very kind to me. And I did her chart. And the next day, literally, I had a queue of people. And that started like a mad time. Sometimes I was doing 5 or 6 charts a day,
Wow.
even more sometimes,
Yeah.
and 7 days a week, and buying rainforest with the money. So I bought about, at one point, I think I bought about a plot of about 500 hectares of virgin forest and various other bits and pieces, which we lost in the civil. I mean, we're living in the middle of a civil war where everything was unstable. But it was, for me, I mean, I love astrology and I'm always going to do astrology, whether it's my work or not. I
Hmm.
just find it fascinating.
Yeah.
But in Colombia, it was special in the way that it opened doors. Colombian society is very stratified class-wise, and they don't really interact except, somebody's working for somebody else.
Okay.
And there's a lot of divisions because of politics and violence and everything. And astrology opened all those doors,
Hmm.
just all of them.
Yeah.
So, I'd end up in prisons, or I'd end up in a presidential palace, or I'd end up with the bishop. It
Yeah.
was
It's a
mad
great
stuff like,
leveler, isn't it? It's fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And they were all quite openly, because, Colombia's a very open society in a lot of
Hmm.
ways, intellectually. So I never met any prejudice against it ever there. And then I moved back to Ireland in 2007, 2008, at the end of the Celtic Tiger, which was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
And people didn't know what astrology was.
Hmm.
You know, the whole Irish thing is reading the cards or the tea leaves, things like that,
Yeah.
or mediums. And astrology was just a rare thing here at the time. But that's changed thanks to the internet, really. I mean, people are more and more interested in astrology. But still, I would say maybe not as much as in other countries. It
Hmm.
hasn't really taken off here.
Right.
I don't know if
Yeah,
people see it
I
as an
think there
English
is,
thing, which is never popular, but
of
I'm not
course, yes.
sure.
But I think there really still is a stigma around that by the church. You know, there's such a
Maybe,
strong
yeah, yeah.
stigma, and I think people still kind of have that sort of suspicion. Never mind that there's all kinds of zodiac glass windows in cathedrals around Europe, but
Absolutely.
but
It's
there's still this,
amazing. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's still there, yeah.
yeah.
And so you've been basically practicing astrology for 40 years, really. That's
Yeah. Well, I was studying, I kind of went public with it
hmm.
and and started working at it as a job about 93.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great. Great.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Mhm.
find I will link your website below this video
Oh, thank
for
you.
people
Yeah.
to follow. But I find also you've written some really interesting blogs about different things, and I really am fascinated by your bigger vision. And we thought we'd have a chat around the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we're in the thick of, really, that has already been kind of creeping up on us since last year.
Mm.
But that becomes perfected on the 20th of February. So we can jump in to have a look at that and see what comes from that chat. Shall I share the screen and we have a look
Yeah.
together and
Okay.
go through
Yeah.
a bunch of topics? We'll see. This is just this moment. Actually, I'll click on exactly this moment where when we started our conversation, just for the joke, actually, the cosmic joke, we actually had Pluto and the Sun exactly conjunct at 3 degrees 25 arc minutes of Aquarius, which is, I find, really wonderful. And here we have now the midheaven is with Mercury. So what better way to chat away about astrology than a Mercury in Aquarius on the midheaven? And then we also, as you pointed out earlier, we've got the moon for the very last time coming up to Neptune. We're not going to see the moon and Neptune again in our lives in the end of Pisces. So that's exciting. We've only got another, what, 3, 4 days of Neptune in Pisces. As I said to you, it's on my Mercury, and I don't even know what I'm going to do to celebrate when this thing leaves my Mercury. I think maybe I'll take a heroic dose of mushrooms or do an ayahuasca to celebrate, just so that I have just a reference point of what it was like to have Neptune on my Mercury for 2 years. Um, and so here we are. Here we are. This is the big moment. We've got this really extraordinary, also sextile, almost still. Well, I mean, it's still very much in within a half a degree between Saturn and Uranus, which we also won't see again. So, what do you make of all of this? What do you make of this conjunction? And or do you want? Shall we finish up with the Pisces story? What have you made of Neptune and Pisces?
In Pisces,
Mhm.
well, I mean, I think, the growth of, interests in empathy and therapy and dream work and all those things have been very good.
Yeah, yeah.
But like Neptune and Pisces is a bit of a poison chalice at times, isn't
Yeah,
it?
tell me.
Yeah, because it feeds our illusions in even in ways that we're not conscious because it's Pisces. So it's kind of an all-enveloping sort of feeling of, like a fish in the water doesn't recognize the water
So
as a
true.
separate
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And also,
I'd
this
say
is
the last 12 years have been, and as the illusions get stronger, people are becoming more aware of them.
yeah, this is what we were
There
chatting
is more
about before we
consciousness.
started, right?
Mm,
Before we hit the record button, we had a good old chat about the this basically almost by the time it's done a century of Pluto and Neptune. What is it, 90 years or something in total of Neptune in sextile with Pluto. And we're still in it until 2027, really, really strongly. And then it really does continue, I think, till 2030, 32 even. So that has also been part of that, especially on steroids in a way, with Neptune going into Pisces, and the quality of the even more illusional, delusional sort of search for what is true, what is not true, which is Pluto, and then the power dynamics over who owns the truth, and then that Neptune in Pisces, which has been who knows what is true. Like this is the AI story that we're in, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we'll look at that in a bit after the Neptune-Saturn conjunction. We'll take a look at the mini grand trine that's coming out of this
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So let me just
Yeah.
switch to the chart actually of the ingress, or rather of the actual conjunction,
Mm,
so we can look at what's coming through that particular conjunction. So that's quite a chart in and of itself, isn't it? It's a unique moment in time.
mm.
And on top of that, we've got the Chiron and Eris conjunction. Do you work with Chiron?
I do with Chiron, but I don't know much about Eris except, what I hear you talk about and other people on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I find Eris to be really interesting for our times, particularly because for me it has a lot to do with hypocrisy and recognizing hypocrisy, but also having to look at ourselves through where we're being hypocritical ourselves and to recognize where we're playing the game we're accusing other people of playing. You know what I mean? And I feel like that Eris has been where we've been in the because also with Eris, it's almost like with the Pluto sextiling Neptune, it's been this really long, long extended period of time that Eris has been in Aries. So everybody alive today, like you said earlier, is pretty much carrying these well, at least the Pluto-Neptune dynamic in one way, shape, or form, but the Eris in Aries is pretty much with everybody these days. You'd have to be very elderly not to have that. And so I think that's also a part of the bigger sort of open, bolder, more militarized society that we live in as well. And then that adds to the hyper sort of police state, so sort of energy that we're also contending with, especially because the Chiron Eris first conjoined in Aries, that was about, I think it was like 11, 12 degrees of Aries. And that was in 1971, 72, and a little bit into 73. And we're having it again. We had it in May last year and October 2025, and again now on the 19th of March. So it's effectively, again, within a degree, pretty much as Saturn and Neptune conjoin in the same sign. So I find that a really interesting signature as well, because we were talking earlier about what the Mars rulership now means. What do you make of all that? With the now we're no longer looking to Jupiter, we're looking to Mars.
Yeah. Um, well, you know what? Mars rules the armed forces,
Hmm.
militaries. I'd say there's going to be a lot of changes and maybe revolutions or rebellions within armed forces who are being asked to do things they don't want to do. I mean, that is one possibility.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as I understand it, Eris is a bit of an angry planet, so
Mhm.
we could just have more extreme things, actions by people with guns.
Yeah.
Um,
Like rogue, because it's Aries, right? So it'll always be
yeah,
something to do with the individual self-defense, individual rights,
yeah.
sovereignty. Mm.
And there's going to be some kind of effort to oversimplify Neptune, oversimplify the truth. Because Aries is a really nice, simple, straightforward sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Neptune is complicated and complex. So I think we should be aware of that, of the news that's coming at us, and things being presented in good and bad and black and white. Really? You know.
Yeah, things and people as well, I'd say. Like especially
And
because
people.
Aries is the
Yeah.
person as well. So beware of the bogeyman, beware of who you're told to hate. I think this is really important, especially with Pluto in Aquarius, especially with Mars in
Mm.
Aquarius while it's ruling this. Beware of who you are othering, beware of who you are pointing fingers of blame at. And then we come back to the Eris. Eris is Mars's
Yeah.
sister. That's a sextile that's building there between them. And And Eris is also about that hypocrisy, like, that expression, and you point a finger of blame and you've got those three fingers pointing right back at you. And so it can be very easily turned into a very divisive energy. We were like talking about the propaganda dynamic that has been so strong with the sextile between Pluto and Neptune all these years, and the hyper influence of media and the way that people are being told what to think by not being told certain things, and then by being told a particular aspect of other things. And I think that is something for everyone to be really aware of as well as we go into this.
Yeah. Yeah. I have so many thoughts going through my mind as you're talking. I can't capture them all. Huh?
Yeah, just throw a couple out then, and we'll start with those. Just throw a couple.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the oversimplification of things. I would worry about that. And yet we've all learned a lot about the complexity of things while Neptune has gone through Pisces.
Yeah, and
And
also in some ways, many people are not having it. Like it's almost swung the other way, which is like a hyper cynicism, where we go in with a kind of a feeling of I don't trust any of you, or I don't
yeah,
trust the news, or I don't trust the government, or whatever the thing is. It's that has kind of broken down, and now with Saturn Neptune together, I wonder how people are they going to feel like they're suddenly things are going to be so different, and now they are able to trust, and then they might blindly trust, because that Aries is also that wonderful kind of open-minded, naive, let's try this, let's go there, let's discover this, wouldn't that be fun if we did that, without necessarily thinking of the consequences. Because where we had the Saturn Neptune in 1989 three times, we had that conjunction where Saturn was at home. Saturn was in Capricorn. Now we've got Saturn in its fall, and it's not really operating at its best, and it's of course under the orders of Mars, wherever Mars is. So that makes me wonder: is it going to be, uh, what is actually the way that people will be moving forward? And we're in this strange paradox between this sort of desire for more community, more bonding, more connection, and simultaneously having this very Aries energy very strongly right off the bat, which is much more about what do I want, how do I want to be in the world, and what are my needs, and so on.
yeah,
So I would also wonder if people, we just need to be careful also wherever that feels like this is a quick win, or that'll work out for me, but then noticing that there's also a long run that we need to think about, like a communal
yeah,
picture and a longer game that we need to think about.
yeah. Because Saturn, one of the good things about Saturn that one appreciates as one gets older is
Hmm.
that it represents caution and thinking and looking before you leap.
Hmm.
And Aries really doesn't look before they leap in
Yeah,
general.
yeah,
And so Saturn and Aries loses that caution. And when you look at the Saturn Mars or the Saturn Neptune conjunction, where in places where Saturn was happy, like in Libra in the beginning of the 50s and in Capricorn, there weren't wars as such, hot wars. I mean, there was the Cold War at the beginning of the 50s. And then at the beginning of the 90s, the Soviet Union fell and there was the end of history, but there wasn't a war about it at that time. Like it wasn't a
yeah. It
hot
was more
war.
like demilitarization, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was Afghanistan, that was definitely a
Yeah.
hot
I mean,
war.
of course, we're
But
talking about the West here. Yeah. This
yeah,
is a
yeah, because
thing we
if,
have
if
to
the
remember.
farther we go east, then we still find all the wars, like in the 50s, early 50s, 53, I
Yeah.
think it was.
Korea.
Korea, and then the
Mm,
division of Korea, which is the Saturn Neptune theme, and then Vietnam as well. That was when the US started
mm.
insinuating itself into Vietnam, and the French kind of took off. And so, yeah, I'm always a little bit suspicious about this peace and love thing. So it's where we have to stay alert to words
Yeah.
that we're not paying attention to, because eventually they do come and bite us in the backside at a certain point, especially because we somehow in the West seem to always be at the epicenter of them.
Yeah,
Um,
but to finish that thought, when Saturn and Neptune were together in Cancer in 1914, that was a world war,
yeah, yeah,
And the other times there were all the usual invasions and wars, but there wasn't a world war in the way that the first. I mean, of course, Pluto was there too, and Pluto exaggerates everything.
right.
But and Saturn's in its fall in Cancer, and now it's not very happy in Aries.
Yeah, so Saturn's in its fall
Mm,
now, and it's in detriment in Cancer. And
in
what's
detriment, yeah.
interesting is we have this Mars in a what we can only call kind of a mutual generosity according to the traditional astrology with Saturn. So they're in each other's signs, but they're not
Yes.
really in an easy, they're not really seeing each other in a way that they can actually relate to each other. So I find that very interesting in the sense of what you were saying about the sort of early 50s where the wars are there, but they're a little under the hood. They're not really sure what's going on. And it's almost like things are operating in a way that we can't grasp, we can't see it. So I think we might not be able to understand what this means. In my way of seeing the Mars conjunction with Pluto,
Mm,
which is just now, as we are speaking today. No, it's not. It's 27th. It was the Sun conjunct Pluto today,
mm,
and I think we need to have Mars coming up to conjoin Neptune, conjoin Saturn in the spring, like that'll be I think in April before we really catch on to what's actually happening. And that will
mm,
maybe help us find out what is this going to really represent here, because I still think we're kind of under this. It's too hard to figure out. Like we were saying earlier before we started recording, how things happened in such a way that was so surprising and confusing in 1989 when things started to change. And it's like, is that really happening? Did that just
mm,
happen? Is this really going on? And it was day after day after day. There wasn't certainly not a week that went by without a major, major change around the world. And I suspect that we're going to be in the throes of that in 2026 still,
mm,
but it'll be clarifying, at least in terms of a certain intentionality around the theme once Mars goes into its own sign. Because I think the sun is there with it when it goes in, which gives us a little bit more sense of the leadership as well going on around the world.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, 2026 has already started off like that, hasn't it, really? That,
yeah.
you know, Greenland and Ukraine and God knows what else. Like it's
What next?
nonstop. Every day you go, what?
I know. I honestly, I've been looking at the NATO chart for years because I used to work there, and I worked at the European Commission as well. So I'm always curious, and I'm curious about the euro and all these things. And I knew
Yeah.
that this was the breaking point. This was coming as soon as Pluto moved into Aquarius. It would be the beginning of the end. And I never in a million years thought that an invasion of Greenland would be the cause of it. I never, like, if you would ask me, what are all the scenarios that you could create? And see, this is also why it's so difficult to, you can't second guess the universe.
Yeah.
You can't really fully predict what's going to happen. We can only give the kind of the feeling of it.
Mm,
Just like take your umbrella or don't, whatever. But it would never have occurred to me in a million years that this would be the breaking point of NATO, and there we are.
mm,
Yeah. So, and what do you think in terms of individuals now? If we go for a little bit more towards the individual story, where we come to a shift that might be more, referring to a person, how would one use, let's say, this notion of the Neptune Saturn in Aries in terms of, let's say, forward planning, given that it's at the Aries point, it's at the world point, and this feels like I can kind of restart the engines. I can do something different now.
mm. Well, like anywhere where one has been feeling like a victim during these 12 years while Neptune was in Pisces, and maybe not finding the door to that, and with Saturn there as well. And then, when those two planets are going to be ruled by Mars now, there's you've more of a chance of fighting your way out of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I mean, it might be on a personal level, it might be on a political level, but the whole attitude that we've had towards victimhood, for better and for worse, because there's been a lot of difficult, people have been encouraged to be victims where they're not victims,
Yeah.
or where it keeps them stuck in victimhood. And that's about to change, I would say, when Neptune goes into Aries. I mean, we haven't had that for 161 years.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hard to look back at recent history and go, oh, this is what's going to happen.
Mm.
Because that was what the mid 1800s was the last time Neptune went into Aries.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of a lot of uprisings in, for people who were genuinely victims in
Yeah.
society, poor people, workers, the writing of the Communist Manifesto, all that kind of thing.
Slavery.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and when Neptune was discovered, Saturn was right beside it at that point.
Mm.
So there's some kind of companionship there. Although for me as an astrologer, I think Saturn, Neptune, oh, that's really hard to put together.
It is. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Because
paradox,
one's so
isn't it?
nebulous and one's so concrete. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But it
Mm.
also, I mean, for me, if we look at the notion of it's about sovereignty in every sense, in the way it's like the not personal sovereignty, especially as we come into this age of AI and this really hyper controlling technocracy that we're kind of living under, this especially globally, we don't even have a way of escaping it. And also the notion of national sovereignty, as we're seeing, with NATO falling apart and with borders being redrawn back in the sort of a colonial era, sort of, I'll have one of those, and so I'll take
Mm.
one of those. And that notion of the boundary disappearing, the border disappearing, people often talk about the affinity that the Russians and therefore and sometimes Soviet. I think we need to put more Soviet emphasis on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but that has always been about boundaries. It's always been about the border and also the ideological thing, which for me is also the Neptunian ideal. Like, what am I imagining in terms of how to live life and so on? And that also hits the wall at a certain point with Saturn Neptune. It's like, oh, well, this is the ideal, but okay, here's the cold, hard reality. Like you chip down the Berlin Wall, but now what? And
Mm.
it took a long time for the Aussies, the East Germans, to fit in. And even today, and I know many
Mm.
Germans, and even today, they don't feel fully integrated with West Germans.
No.
There's a division in the similar kind of sense of, let's say, North and South of Ireland, although they're the same people, there's a difference, you see, and so
Yeah.
that hasn't gone. So
Mm.
it's where that ideal, this imagined perfection of a way of being hits the concrete or the hard reality of Saturn that says, okay, now make it work, do the thing that is necessary to make this thing
Mm.
happen. And it's not that it shouldn't happen, it's just that it's never going to be smooth and easy, especially with a Mars ruled Saturn
Yeah.
and Neptune.
Well, I mean, we're going to see differences in the way war is waged
Hmm.
with these things in Aries. Uh, More underhand ways, as you pointed out, with Neptune, less visible ways,
Yeah.
and like Saturn and Aries can be cruel. Saturn and Mars together, and Saturn and Neptune together, they're often to do with cruelty and torture. So those are things. I mean, we can't control those things. Like
No.
most of
Yeah.
us, we're not going to make that much difference, except consciousness of what's going on around you always makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do sincerely believe that being a witness, being an honest witness, has
Yeah.
power.
It does, absolutely. And also
Yeah.
our every action and thought has power. The way
Mm.
that we operate on a day-to-day level genuinely makes a difference. And that's where,
Mm.
if I come back to our friend Eris here, with the reference to hypocrisy. And, I get a lot of superficial or performative spirituality, or a performative sort of peacekeeping ideal or whatever, and yet actually underneath that there is still a lot of unresolved anger, or there's a lot of deception, or there's something that is not entirely honest. And so I think this it behooves us individually, because we can only do it individually, to really be careful how we are in our everyday life, in the little things, in the tiny.
Yeah.
This is Aries. It's like, how do I operate in my day to day? How am I navigating myself and going through life in my everyday life? How am I controlling my actions? Because Aries is also about actions in my life, because that's where I start with, it starts with me. That's sort of
Yes.
that code.
And we often despair that, that means we don't have power.
Mm,
But when you think of it, leaders are very beholden to people.
yeah.
Like they really are, much more than we realize, because it's a vulnerability they tend to keep hidden. But leaders care. They have to care about what people think
Yeah,
and
at
feel
least
about
in
them.
terms of at least in terms of the temporal office, right? And at least in terms of their little sort of time on the stage, as it were. If they want to
Yeah.
stay on the stage, they have to have support from the public, and they're also caring about people who we don't know. That's the other interesting part. And that again comes through that Neptunian subterfuge when they are in this, the sextile here with Pluto, who's got the power.
Yeah.
This was
Mm.
the intrigue, the palace intrigue of the past, when everybody was always wondering, like, what is the Richelieu, or who was the person behind the throne, the power behind the throne. And it's very interesting that here we have the exaltation ruler of Aries behind the throne, ninth house to the Aries 10th house. It just happens to be that I use the London, well, Greenwich chart just to keep it at universal time. So it's kind of easy for everybody around the world to see the timing. It's just 12 noon, 49 minutes past the midday on the 20th of February is the actual conjunction, but where you are, it might change, because of course you will have different timings and different ascendants according to when that happens in your part of the world. But in the actual Greenwich chart, the universal time chart, we have the North Node and the Sun together, the exaltation ruler of Aries, kind of whispering behind the scenes what's going on. And then we've got Mars behind that in the eighth house with Pluto kind of like trying to strategize things. So it's very, very difficult to know what this will pan out as, and how this will take shape. But we do, at least one of the other things that Mars is ruling is Black Moon Lilith. I don't know if you work with Black Moon Lilith, but I find that
I don't know much about it. No.
it's very interesting. It's the dark side of the moon. So, we have this aspect of the moon that we never see. So Lilith is always kind of tracking in a slow. There's also an asteroid called Lilith. This is not the same. So this is dark moon Lilith. And here she's in a very tight opposition with Uranus. And again, ruled by Mars in the sign of secrets and in the sign of again, what is hidden, or what can be sort of espionage or spying, or this kind of thing. And I find that really interesting because, of course, you've got Uranus in Taurus, which is the sign of the markets, the financial markets, money markets, and so on. And apparently, the Nasdaq, the Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange chart, not apparently, it actually has a midheaven at zero Aries. And that's, I think, again, deliberate if we look at the way that people use astrology quite deliberately, although never spoken about. But I think to have the New York Stock Exchange on the world point was a deliberate choice. And here we have the Neptune Saturn happening exactly there. So the fact that there's so many aspects here that still call in something a little bit underhanded, something a little bit sneaky. We are in an era where money and the devaluation of currencies is happening extremely rapidly. And I was listening to a fellow called Clive Thompson, who you can find on all the channels. He is a very wealthy wealth management manager in Switzerland. He's British, but he lives in Switzerland. And he was talking about the history of collapsing economies and how all fiat currency goes away. We have we've got a book full of all of these bills. He says worth trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, but worthless, in fact, except for the worth of the paper that they're printed on, because all of them came to this place of being so hyperinflated that it became absurd. He has I think it was something like an $11 trillion Zimbabwean note, one note, and he said that wouldn't even buy a loaf of bread. And we are headed in this direction. I'm trying not to scaremonger, but just to say, this is something that is also, I suspect, reflected in this chart. It's this Black
Yeah.
Moon Lilith that is partly also what we're pissed off about. Like that's a kind of a shorthand for Black Moon Lilith. It's like, what am I pissed off about? And that fifth house, Scorpio with Black Moon Lilith there, and in opposition to Neptune, tells us a story of things that are underhanded, it's not spoken about, things that are secret.
And
Saturn.
is that I think that Uranus Black Moon Lilith opposition, that's also related to the Euro chart, is it?
Yes, exactly. Well, this is
Yeah.
also especially strong in terms of the money story, you see.
Mm,
Yeah, and then if we look at the dollar and then of course any other currency, they're all
mm,
really vulnerable right now.
mm.
And then of course part of the so-called promise of the future since the COVID era has been to have tokenization of all assets, tokenization of even natural resources. So everything that goes on blockchain. If you have anything of value, the value is on blockchain, which of course is controlled by anyone who can access the blockchain.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the digital currency. Aside from the digital ID, which I think is the theme also of the Saturn-Neptune Aries digital ID is a huge part of this. But the digital currency, where everything is going online and you will no longer have real control. This is, again, the worst case scenario, but it seems to be part of what is already happening. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
But let's look at this. Saturn and Neptune is at 0 degrees of Aries, which theoretically an individual has agency at that point.
Right.
It's where we can start things as one person with our Mars energy and our Sun energy, which is exalted there. So what can we like in a general kind of a way? Um, what kind of thing is that how could we describe in a general way what one could start at that point? And I'm sure lots of people are already thinking about starting new ways of structuring their life.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think what's really important for people is to think even a little bit in terms of historical ways of living, meaning that individuals practice a skill and they have something that they uniquely bring to the community. And so no longer, and I've said this to people in comments for years already, where people say, "Oh, I don't know how, I can't get a job. I haven't had a job." It's like, stop looking for a job and
Yeah.
make your job, and
Mm,
start knitting sweaters, start making pies, start growing a herb garden or whatever. So this is for me the way that I see that, because that Aries point has that reference to the very close tie with the individual and the collective, where it's very much whatever is going on in the collective will impact the individual life, and also what the individual does impacts the collective.
okay.
And that's where like you were saying, having that personal agency is absolutely
Mm,
true. And therefore, having some kind of a sense that if everything falls apart tomorrow, this is what I would offer to the
mm,
community. This is the skill I bring to the table. This is the job I create. And
yes.
and I would say also, especially with that sense of borders being a little bit confusing and challenged and being threatened day by day by certain presidents, I would say that the more that you can offer what you have to a let's say at the very least regional or multinational audience, or whatever,
Mm,
multiple different places, people, enterprises, that would be the thing to invest in a way that is like, this is what I'm good at and this is what I do. So we go back to this almost like the old, the trades and the crafts. Like I live for 36 years, I've been living in Brussels. And if you go to the Grand Place, you have all of these houses, these massive, massive houses that are gilded. There's gold, literal gold on them, and these statues that are gilded. as well as the Hôtel de Ville, and they are all symbolizing the tradesmen. They're all symbolizing this, like the brewer's house, and then there's the ironworker's house, and so on. These were the guilds of the old days. And I do believe, ironically, that we will benefit from going back in some form to that way of looking at things, like not, getting a job at IBM and expecting to retire 40 years later with a nice pension. That's done. We're really done with that cycle. There will not be any coming back to that cycle. Everything, even already under Pluto in Capricorn, became about what are called 0 hour contracts. It's like you no longer have employment security. That was Pluto in Capricorn. Sorry, you thought we had your back? No, you got to figure
Mm.
it out. And you got to work twice as hard, and you still don't have health insurance or whatever it is. And now I think we've come almost to the extreme of that, which says, yeah, you really have to be independent. And in the way that homesteaders, Aries is a pioneering energy, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
all about the ones that jump in and do things early on. And things in terms of those homesteaders, or, and each of us alive today is the biological product of people who overcame extreme circumstances, so
Yes, and didn't have pensions or employment
yeah.
benefits.
And
Yeah.
we're the winners. Like, stop
Yeah.
thinking of yourself, like you said, as the victim or as the loser. We're the winners. We got through,
Yeah.
this far. It means that there's some level of capacity, but we have to remember that. That's all. We just
Mm.
have to keep reminding ourselves, oh, I am capable. I have agency. This is a very strong Aries word. I have agency.
Mm.
And then again with the Aries influence of that Mars symbolized in the Mars in Aquarius, it is also about this feeling of what is my goal? What is the ultimate goal? Is it a selfish goal? Or is it a goal that takes us all forward? That Mars in Aquarius, it can be really strong-minded and opinionated and hard to shake out of an ideological goal. But if the goal is us together in this, like we're all in this and we can't separate one out from another because we're all interdependent, then having a goal like that, because Aries needs goals, otherwise Aries goes crazy. And
Mm.
Aries, with that goal, having a sense of my goal is also a shared goal. It's a vision that I
Mm.
have of me in the community. It's me doing things that involves other people and the benefit that I can bring other
Yeah.
people. And then,
And
then we
but
can use the Neptune.
you say Aries goes mad without a goal, and
Yeah.
it's a very directed, simple, straightforward kind of sign.
Mm-mm.
But Neptune there is going to mess around with that part of our charts because you can't be simple and straightforward with Neptune. And with Saturn there, you have to think about really long-term goals, which is not an Aries thing either.
Yeah, yeah,
So we're really being challenged to grow up because Aries is kind of the first sign. It's a childish or a teenager sign or something
yeah.
like that.
And
The energy of young men.
yeah, yeah.
Let's just get out and do it now.
Yeah, yeah, and not
We're
think
being
of the
forced to be
consequences. Like,
mature.
we've just got our driver's license and we're going to go down the highway at 110 kilometers an hour. Yeah,
Yeah,
this. I had just now this vision of like a young teenager on their first babysitting job, where all this was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I think I'm really mature, so I'm going to try and have a go at this parenting thing, and then sort of coming away all ragged because they realize
yeah,
how difficult.
yeah,
It's like herding cats. But I think it's really interesting how our conversation is a reflection of the Saturn-Neptune, because we try and go in a positive direction and then we're like, yeah, that's not good. We got to go over here. And then we get into the negative and the hard and then we're like, yeah, but still. And and
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's kind of what we've got, isn't it?
And the other thing for me that the way our conversation is going reflects for me is that we have no idea what's coming next because it's so freaking new. Like it's new. Well, how
Yeah,
can we know new things? Things
yeah,
that are genuinely new, we
yeah.
can't know them
That's so
until
true.
we have enough distance, enough of the path run so we can look back and go, oh, that's what started then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, because
And that's
absolutely, it's
happening.
what I personally work on in terms of my own any kind of anxiety or fear around what's next, what's coming, or whatever, and what I help other people with if they're asking, I say, it's that moment before you met the person you love, you didn't know them. then all of a sudden you met them and the world is just full of possibilities and you still don't know how it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
And yet it's just you're on this threshold and it's like everything's changed now, but
Yeah.
we still don't know what's coming. And I
No,
would
that's very
say in the
interesting.
same way as sort of falling in love or, finding this romance, really try and, like keep yourself a little bit grounded. Like in Chinese medicine, I remember being shocked to hear this, but I totally understand it now. In Chinese medicine, they say that there is no distinction between an energetically in an individual who's in love or who's completely crazy. And they don't make the distinction. They said energetically you are in the same place. And
Yeah.
I think that would be a good thing to recall because that's kind of where we're at. It's like don't go like completely off the charts
Yeah.
here because you might be missing a few things. There might be a
Mm,
few red flags that you wished that you'd seen early on.
mm,
But
mm.
yes, we don't know what we're talking about. We're trying, but it's just never going to be what we think it is it?
No,
Yeah.
no, and it's so new. We don't have, you know, we don't have the experience to know what it's going to be like. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think,
that's coming from two people who have been around a little bit. That's the other thing. Like it doesn't matter how old you are. You might be 18 or you might be like 78, doesn't matter. We have not had this experience, and so we're all in this novelty together. And
yeah.
there again, that's the power, as you were saying, of the individual creating what they need or want in this moment,
Mm,
that zero Aries,
mm,
where you really say, well, I don't know what this is going to look like, so let me just focus in right here in my Aries way, in my space, my best sort of enlightened self-interest, and do the thing that I know I could and that I
yeah.
want to do. So I think it really kind of boils down to that.
And also be aware there's a lot of vested interests who are very interested in making you frightened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That is
for
so
sure.
important to remember every
Yeah,
time you see a television screen or you scroll through your messages or whatever.
yeah.
There are a lot of, even if it's good people trying to inform you, it's still clickbait. They're still living off of,
Yes,
getting you
true.
interested. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, and I think that's also maybe a really good way of looking at the Aries as well, to be, I said enlightened self-interested, but I think at a certain point we just have to be self-interested as well, where it's
mm,
just like, okay, wait a minute, is this working for me or not?
yes.
And then does what I'm relating to or doing also work
Mm,
for at least a strict minimum of people around me, or am I causing chaos?
mm,
Like I was listening to Norm Finkelstein a few days ago, and he referred to the current US president as the human wrecking ball. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting because that is where we have to kind of look at what is the consequence. This is why I say this, because Aries jumps in and asks questions later. It's kind of like shoot first, ask questions later is the Aries sort of slogan. And this is where we need to be in that space of, am I going to be the human wrecking ball, or am I going to be doing something that actually contributes to something that is, even in my little patch, going to improve something.
yeah.
So it's a personal, and this is very, I think that because we're looking at this as a theme that is 36, 37 year long theme, right? This is the energy of the theme, just in the same way as the last cycle was a Capricorn energy. We want to keep in mind this is not just a moment in time, but we're setting a tone here for 3 decades to come or more, 3.5 decades to come. And so the theme is, how am I shaping the world around me? And is that a good or a bad thing? Is
Mm,
where am I on the scale of helpful or not?
mm,
Yeah, it's the Chiron Eris, ruled by Mars in sextile to it. I'd say that's also part of what you were saying earlier about the healing dynamic. To what extent is my healing or my identification, because this is also Aries, the way I identify, is that actually preventing me from actually taking action because I'm so stuck on the notion of in the process of healing or in a process of victimization that I can't overcome it. And I would say this is where this can give us a kind of a courage to
mm,
say, it's time now to move on from that and to
mm,
to say, well, what is done has been done, and there's a certain, obviously, a period of grief and a period of healing that is required for anything that is huge. But has that become the identity that Neptune in Pisces has given you? Because I think this is, since the first ingress of Neptune, which I think was April 2011, that notion of social media just exploded under Neptune in Pisces. And part of the concomitant social impact is, what do they call that now? Um, I've forgotten the word now, but it means that people are, oh, social contagion, they call that. It's a social contagion, meaning people they identify with wounding, they identify with people who, whatever it is, self-harm, or they identify with the anorexics, or they identify with whatever is their particular issue that they're grappling with, and they find their tribe in the pain. And that's the Chiron, is to understand the wounding can be an identity. Chiron in Aries, I identify
Mm,
as inadequate, I identify as painful, I identify as damaged or stupid or whatever the thing is according to your chart. And I always point out that for me, Chiron is about our self-sabotage. So in the same way that Eris is about hypocrisy and not really pointing fingers of blame instead of assuming also I am taking part in this, I'm part of this bigger story, is the Chiron that can also be where we are sabotaging our own self, and how can we overcome that? And I feel really that this sextile coming from a Saturn ruled Mars can actually be really helpful there, where we kind of go, whoa, this is the grown-up minute. Like there is no Santa Claus. I'm sorry, Virginia, there is no Santa Claus. And this is the moment. It's like, okay, here we go. And I'm sorry if the kids are listening, but this is that moment
yeah.
where we get to say, okay, whew, this is it. I can do this. If I'm here, it means I can do it. Right?
Yes, exactly. We're here at this time, so we can do it.
Yeah.
Just going back to a few subjects ago about starting something new,
Mm.
say somebody's thinking of starting something new at the moment, and that sextile with Uranus going into Gemini,
I guess. Shall we go there?
that's really good for all kinds of business, weird businesses people hadn't thought of before, new ways of doing business. Like, it's an excellent time to start something along those lines.
Yeah.
And also to recognize, the markets. What the hell are the markets? What really have they got to do with this in a way?
Yeah.
Human beings have always exchanged things. It's like breathing, which is an exchange, between in and out. We always give things and receive things. Business is us. It's
Yeah.
not capitalism or communism or whatever isms you want. It's us. It's an essential part of deeply essential part of human nature, and nothing is going to stop it.
That's brilliant the way you put that there, and I think that ties in perfectly with the Aries 0 point, the Aries point, because it's up to us. How do we exchange bartering and this kind of thing?
Mm,
How do we exchange? And then to put I've found the chart at the actual ingress chart, which is in a square to the moon, which represents the people, right? The
yeah.
moon is the populace, the people. And so that also is like, this is it. This is your challenge. Now, how do you want to go about this new thing? It's a very interesting dynamic. And that's again with Venus being escorting Uranus out of her house once and for all, kind of going, it's been nice, but please go away now. And here we have also Neptune about to be sextiled by Venus, as this is part of the bigger sort of story, the overall story that is building here between now and June, I guess July especially, where all of these outer planets then start to trine and then sextile each other. So I think we're building a kind of a story here, which is to say, this is we in a way it feels like going back in time.
Mm,
Rather than always looking forward in terms of what futuristic thing can we do, we look back and we say, what always worked for people? Well, what always worked was sharing stuff and was
yes.
being there for each other and being like the barber and the baker and the candlestick maker and all those things, and recognizing that if we do that and we really focus on what has always worked for humanity, we will get through this,
Yeah.
rather than looking at what innovation, what new thing, what out there thing can we imagine. It's like, can we just also come back, because with all this air and fire, we are going to be really ungrounded. We're going to be lacking in a grounding, and even if we take it in the extreme sort of negative literal sense, we are going to have land taken away from us, and we need to then be in that awareness of what is grounding me, where am I connected to, and that often is so basic, so simple. And I said a couple of months ago, or I don't even remember time. I've got Neptune on my Mercury, so who knows what time it is. Let's say last couple of weeks, I said in a video um, that it's good for people to just have that sense of what is what is the thing that I need now in this moment of time, which is that I can touch and feel and own and deal with in my way, that I can rely on, and that always will come back to our inner experience of self, our humanness, our soul, if you like. And what is that thing that nobody can take away from you? This feeling of this is me, and I feel if we really focus in on that too, especially with that mini grand trine, and then the cradle or the basket, depending on what you want to call it, that's coming through July. This is where we can really take off in our sense of really, I don't want to use the word fighting, but working, striving to
Mm.
recognize the beauty of our humanity, because often people are trying to get away from the humanity. They want to go in that Aquarian way, kind of up into the angelic realm and in the asters, as it were. But we are these spiritual beings, and we're just here in this human experience. And I think that's part of what will always keep us making the right decisions, to remember who we really are, because a lot of what's coming in gigabytes, terabytes at us
Mm.
is making us forget who we are. Every time you open your phone, every time you hear something, it's all such a lot of noise that it is difficult actually to sit with yourself and figure out what is my intuition telling me. That's also
Mm.
Aries, isn't it? The intuition and knowing
Yeah. Yeah.
what to do. That's fire, right?
And
Good.
just courageously, impulsively doing it,
Yeah.
which has its side effects, but
Yeah,
generally
yeah,
speaking,
but it's
yeah.
also, it's like the bravery of jumping into a scene where you see a problem and you fix it because you're there,
Mm.
so this is
Mm.
also, again, if we remember who we've come from, generations of people who had a can-do attitude, even if there was trauma on the way, but still those people figured it out, and they did that by collaborating with others, by cooperating in community, by exchanging and bartering, like you said, in markets, and being novel and weird about it is, I think, also very appropriate, because one thing for me that Neptune in Pisces did is it made the rest of the world more like me, because I have a stellium in Pisces, and I have my whole life long felt so weird and felt so out of place and felt so wishy-washy compared to everybody else, and always feeling like I'm concerned with things that nobody else seems to be bothered by. And now suddenly the world seems to be better aligned with that, or at least not all the world, but much of the world. And then we can use that. It's not like we're walking away from it. We're building on that, and we're using that awareness of our interconnected nature and our spiritual nature. And we're using it now. We're putting it to service in the Aries energy, and then with this, like you said, the Uranian way of doing things that's different, doing it in a
Yeah.
new and novel way.
Yeah. And it's collective in some way, it's doing it with groups of people.
Yeah, yeah,
The thing that this recent times, say since 2020 and the COVID stuff, has made me realize is that nobody actually 100% agrees with anybody else ever. It took me because like I'm a Leo with Leo rising, so I just assume that everybody's like, I'm the center of the universe and everybody's like me. And astrology has been a great teacher to get over that.
Yeah.
um, but like there isn't anyone, you will not find anyone, I could guarantee it, I will put a bet on it, that 100% agrees with your viewpoint of the world.
Yeah.
So this notion that you're in a tribe of people who agree with you, and we're learning that, on the NATO level, that they've all thought they were in a club together, and suddenly, you know, Trump's going to take Greenland and Denmark doesn't like it, and they're all in NATO together. It's that, that's a
Yes, yes.
symbol of what we're all learning on a very personal level.
That's a
So there's
great
no point in
analogy. Yeah.
getting het up about ideas
Yeah.
in that kind of angry way. I mean, of course, debate is great. Of course, discussion is great. Shouting at somebody, fine, it's not a problem. But um, not to be forced into it, like we are being forced into.
Yes. Yes. Conform or
Sorry, I don't
else.
know where that comes from
No,
to in what we're
I
talking
think
about, but
it's really interesting that you say this, especially with Uranus, because it is so with reference to that Gemini tendency to want to know. I need to know. I want to know all the information, the facts, and gathering all the facts and so on. But the blessing of Gemini and the curse is that it can see all sides of things and it can gather information almost without bothering what it actually ends up meaning. Like the meaning is more the Jupiterian Sagittarius kind of meaning making, or whatever, the bigger theory of things and so on, the principles and so on. But what we find here is very interesting in terms of that notion that everybody has to believe the same thing, because it can be that, where we've seen that in social media era, where when I was going through university, debate was encouraged. That was part of, you would debate your professor, you would debate your fellow students, you were supposed to argue something so that you would show that you've understood at least one, not that you had to agree on the outcome, but you had to show that you had a process of understanding. And when we were growing up, we never knew what our neighbors, real religious faith was, or what political party. Maybe at election time they would stick these little signs in their lawn if they were really political. That was about as extreme as it got. But otherwise, nobody was really bothered about these things. And it became such a thing, and that was a tool used against us deliberately. And that's again part of what your point was earlier about beware of what you're being told and what you're seeing and how you're hearing it, because that can be the thing that drives a wedge. And what will it be? It will be an idea, and it won't be real. So this is the air sign dilemma, which is air and fire together have lots of ideas and they have lots of opinions, and they have a lot of a sense that that this is the only way, or at least this is the best way for everybody. And that's the Aquarian fixed air, which is that strong sense of ideology. This is the way. And that's where we got Pluto. Pluto is going to
yes.
be, especially in the beginning stages, Pluto will force us to the extreme of Aquarius. And it's only in going through the process that we start to manage it. It's hard to manage in the beginning. It's hard to manage at the end of the sign as well, for the instability of it. But we're still there. And that's where I think your your notion of, like, don't get upset about somebody not having the same idea. I find this sometimes in the comments under a video. People will say something like, I don't agree with everything you say, but that was a good one, or whatever.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
thinking, I've never asked you to agree with anything I said, because why would you? Like you said, it's just not, it
yeah.
doesn't, it's
It's
not
not
a
practical.
requirement.
Yeah.
People are in the same blood family and people don't agree with each other.
Mm,
So why are you expecting a total stranger to align on everything? People are unique and we're all coming with different karmas and different
mm,
experience and different motivations through life. So we need to learn that the higher vision of Aquarius, which is
mm.
tolerance, to get into this. And then maybe that Uranus in Gemini will help us with that. I do believe it's going to require a lot of conscious effort to get to that place of tolerance, because it's easier to be intolerant in this world,
Yeah.
to be
And
your skin.
Gemini is a kind of a tolerant sign. Gemini's
Yeah,
just interested in, whatever's interesting, whether it's right
yeah,
or wrong or good or bad or black or white. Like it's just
yeah.
interesting to Gemini. So yeah, hopefully we will get to that side of Aquarius energy where we appreciate people's uniqueness and our own uniqueness more than anything. That's where it comes from, isn't it? When
Yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
appreciates how unique one is oneself,
Yes,
even if other people might call you weird.
yeah, exactly. You know, there's this funny expression, let your freak flag fly, and that's
Yeah.
that very sort of Aquarian, Uranian energy. And I think that's wonderful when you see how people can be very, very different and still contribute. And I think part of the challenge is to not, again, go too deep into the identification with things. Like that's where it becomes almost like a defiance, like this is who I am and I challenge you to accept me, you know, because you see that it's, you know, if you take an extreme like the punk movement or there's a quality of I assume you're not going to like me and I want you to accept me as I am, and that can be part of the belligerence that we experience with this Aries, strong Aries influence and the Pluto in Aquarius. So it's also being aware of how you conduct yourself. Like you don't force people to accept you. You just be who you are, as you are. And don't worry about what other people think, because that way you're in a space of flow and sincerity as opposed to some kind of performative need to be seen, which is again a part of the Aquarian shadow is the Leo that needs to be seen, needs to be acknowledged. And then in the Aquarian way, it's coming from a place of not feeling acknowledged.
Mm.
So that could be something even right now as we come into the next, the full moon. I almost forgot about this full moon in Leo because there's so much going on. I was like, oh, I didn't do a video on the full moon in Leo because there's so much going on with some
Yes.
pokey old full moon. But I think this could be the lesson that we pick up on now because we're going to also have the nodes moving in there as well. So many
Yeah.
opportunities to learn this lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Hmm.
And so as a Leo, you're going to be impacted really powerfully, aren't you? You're going to have a lot of change. What has changed so far for you because you've already had 2 or 3 years, I guess, of Pluto in October?
Well, I was saying to you earlier, when Pluto first opposed my sun, which was at the beginning, at the end of 24 and the beginning of 25, and at that point, Mars was on my sun. So I had a Pluto Mars opposition, like triggering my sun, which is very close to Uranus at the beginning of Leo. And I consciously decided to do something with it. And because Uranus is a very nervous kind of energy, and my brain tends to torture me at time with all kinds of weird thoughts. And I thought, okay, I'm going to stop that. We're going to do something about that. And I went on a 10-day silent retreat with no phone over that Christmas period and New Year period of 24, 25. And I have to say, in slow, maybe subtle ways, and maybe ways that other people don't notice, but I notice,
Mhm.
uh, my life has changed quite deeply.
Wow, that's
And the
lovely.
way I think, or the way my thoughts think me,
Hmm.
it has changed. And been able to pull back from, um, you know, damaging thoughts or obsessive thoughts or, getting annoyed about ridiculous things.
Yeah.
It has helped. And I'm only on the first year of really um, using meditation as a tool.
Fantastic. Well, you might want to book.
Mm,
You might want to book that again in October because you're going to get that Mars opposition again, aren't you?
yeah,
3 degrees
yeah,
again.
yeah.
So there you go, another Vipassana retreat in October for you. But you see how that's such a beautiful example of constructively working with these energies rather than sitting and waiting to see what happens and
Yes.
but
Mm,
anticipating, well, there's going to be change. And of course, Pluto in its basic definition is about transformation. And it's
mm,
whatever is the degree of transformation is kind of not always up to us. And what is being transformed or how is not always up to us. But if we move in
yeah.
the direction of that, we work with that, right? We work with
Yes.
the energy that says, okay, I'll play and I'm up for this new thing and let's
Mm.
try and see what that's like.
And that opposition was between my first house and the seventh house, which is the relating to other people and other people relating to me axis in the
Right.
chart. And I wanted to change that. Like I wanted to change my uh, impulsive jump into conclusions kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, And I mean, probably take me another few lifetimes, but it's a start. Yeah.
But again, as long as when you're aware, that's the thing. Like
Mm,
half of our transformation and growth spiritually or psychologically is about awareness, isn't it? It's about
mm,
what I realize is an issue or what I realize is something that makes me feel unhappy or uncomfortable or whatever. And then the rest of the way is figuring out how to navigate that. But once we're aware of it, we can't never be aware of it again. It's like it's always a part of who we've become.
yes.
So I know a lot of people fear like a Pluto transit is for many
No.
people
Mm,
unnecessarily a source of, or a Saturn for that matter, a source of a lot of fear. And
mm,
if you just look at your example, you say, well, that is the use of it. It's like, what do I want to shed, let go of? Because there's a part of me that's not what I want anymore.
mm.
And you're talking about your son, so that's very, very much about you and your consciousness and the things that you do and the purpose in life and things. That's a really personal transit. So that's something that people can consider as we go through these
Yeah. And
changes.
also, I didn't really put it into these words till you started talking there, but like it's Pluto opposite my sun. So one of my motivations was recognizing where I was being manipulated to be in certain ways. I was allowing myself to be manipulated to think in certain ways. Whether it's by myself or my nearest and dearest or the television or the powers that be or whoever, but that I wasn't thinking independently, which is very important to me.
Gosh, that's a really, really great insight, especially for now, especially for this year,
Mm.
right? I had Pluto, so I have a 29-degree descendant in Capricorn and my Cancer ascendant 29 degrees. And I had Pluto again for those 2 dreadful years of Pluto going back and forth in this sort of slow, slow way that it does. And that was where I also came across, and this is maybe good for people to pay attention to, things that were power struggles in terms of being controlled, but especially around yeah, it's like what because I have a natal pattern of overgiving and having difficulty with boundaries with all the water I have in my chart, and realizing where it was this manipulation that was making me feel guilty, therefore I would do things, and it was through a number of different more challenging struggles with finding myself in that, finding who's really trying to do what to me here, and who do I owe what to as well, and or whom is it? And then I realized, oh, that's what this power thing is with Pluto. That took me that transit to figure out that's what this Pluto power story is all about,
Mm.
because I hadn't really personally been able to understand what that represented. In my own experience of the everyday, it hadn't really come through in that way or so viscerally, let's say, until
Mm.
it hit my descendant, and I realized, oh, that's what that is. It's like, where do I actually have to step into myself, and to say, oh, wait, I see what's going on here now, and you have to have it kind of thrown at you to be able to see it.
Yes. Yeah. Because I had great notions that I was entirely independent, my mind was, until I started to realize I was having reactions that weren't really me in some ways, or I didn't agree with.
Right, right. And
And to
also,
the realm of ideas, which is a big deal to
yeah, and
me.
this
Yeah.
was happening also in the context, was it already then that Neptune had already gone into Aries, or was it just
No,
before?
it was
Oh,
still, I think that was a bit later in the year. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you would have just been that would be Chiron and Eris in Aries that was somehow
Yeah.
influencing that. But I think that's an interesting point in terms of Aries and all of this Mars energy that we've got really powerfully, especially the first 6 months of the year. But to recognize, and also we're going to have Mars on Uranus when the planets are aligning. You're going to have that by sextile with your sun then, and having the triggers for anger that we have,
Mm,
that are collective triggers that are deliberately provoking us to respond
mm,
with anger, and always this kind of just an overarching sense of injustice. Because we also have to think about this conjunction Saturn-Neptune and all the everything that comes through Aries from now on, of course, is going to be also referring by opposition to everything Libran and the notion of justice and fairness
Yes.
and harmony and peace and all those things. Um, that we feel angry about. Most people feel I'm angry about this state of the world or that state of something, and so we can also use this as an opportunity to dig into why am I angry.
Mm,
Because I certainly have felt so much anger with reference to what's going on in the world and things that have been building up over decades and never acknowledged or never dealt with in a way that feels honest and fair. And I really have to work at it. It's a Buddhist sort of meditation practice to work with anger and try and extract the seeds of anger so that we don't water those seeds of anger in us and that we try and water the seeds of compassion and understanding instead. Um, and it's an ongoing job. And I found that the one way that I could do that with more ease was to really extract myself from that sort of constant information gathering, constant awareness of what's going on, because I was
yeah.
very much a political junkie, wanting to know what's going on, who said what, when did that happen, and then I realized it's actually part of why I'm angry.
Yeah.
And so Pluto is asking us to let go of something. For me, Pluto has also gone over my Venus just now, and that's the last time exact. Uh, and that also is values as well, right? So it's been a big change in my values where previously my values were very much about understanding what's going on in the world and having an opinion about what's going on in the world and so on. And now I realize, no, to survive and be sane in this situation, I need to know less. I need to have a less of an awareness of what's going on and rather be, informed on the margins of what's going on and focus in on what is specific to what I can deal with. And that has been my Pluto story, my Pluto journey.
Mm. Do we have time to look at the Pluto-Neptune sextile, or shall we leave that for
Oh
another
no,
time?
I'd love to. If we can keep
Yeah.
going, that would be great. Let's have a look at the
Okay.
yeah, this mini grand trine, right? This is a
Mm.
really big deal. There's so
Could
many
could
charts.
I just say, as an introduction to that, from my point of view,
Yeah.
is that, like we were talking earlier about how all these trine and sextile aspects between big planets, they're all big planets, far away planets that move slowly, um, that it will make uh, powerful people, that they'll be able to achieve their goals more easily.
Hmm.
And bad things will happen more easily, basically.
Yeah.
But those things are available to, like, that energy is available to all of us.
Right. Yeah.
That's a really important thing to recognize. Like, I'm as tuned into that as Donald Trump is, if you want to look at
Yeah.
it like that, or, whoever your favorite bogeyman is.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, like, it's an energy that's available. It's like the grid, you can turn it on, or you can be aware that there's a switch there.
Yeah, that's a great point because there, what we forget always is that we are the ones putting ourselves in the box,
Yeah,
right? This is very Aquarius as
yeah,
well. Like I want to have that power, the Leo quality of being seen and leadership and all that stuff, but I keep myself in the box, and I have this
yeah.
this illusion of sort of whatever it is, whether it's equality or whatever complex we're looking at, superiority, inferiority. And what we're forgetting is that's what we're doing to ourselves. And for me, that's the signification of the Eris and Chiron together.
Okay.
Where am I putting myself in the box? Because that's about this question of hypocrisy. But hypocrisy that you see outwardly is half the story. And where am I not taking responsibility? Or in the Chiron sense, where am I tripping myself up and believing I don't have a say in what's going on? At the very least, in terms of how I interpret what's going on or how I'm working with it. So your point is well taken. I think that could be a really almost the theme of the year. Where do I disempower myself by believing I don't have what it takes? And that's the gift that astrology brings. It's like, well, we all have different skills and emphases in the chart, but what is it we're going to do with that, right? Where are we going to use that? Beautiful. So I'm just randomly coming up on the days leading up to this magic situation here. So as we get into the middle of June and onwards, things start to get really novel. Like we're in the middle of novelty already now. But as we go towards the end of June, just as Jupiter is about to leave Cancer, we also have the nodes, which are a month away roughly from leaving Pisces and Virgo. And there's a square on the 29th, 30th of June, there's a square with the nodes and Mars, which is coming up to its conjunction with Uranus as they build this sextile. You see, so we're just again days away from this very unique expression of our times. So the actual conjunction is there, 3rd July, 4th of July, I think is the perfected conjunction from a universal time perspective. And as we go into this, at 4 degrees now, we have a retrograde Pluto, a direct Neptune, and soon to be 4 degrees, direct Uranus. And that is this famous cradle or boat, bassinet, whatever you want to call it, basket, that André Barbeau was talking about in the 70s. He was looking at this aspect. The French astrologer who passed in 2019, but so many of you might have heard of him. And so if we look at this aspect, once Jupiter comes in and starts to put the lid on the cradle, so if I draw it with the cursor, we can see the cradle here being formed, but it actually is such an unusual thing. It's lasting for weeks, actually. It has its perfection moments, but it lasts really over the space of late June into July. So here, once we get that Jupiter, by the way, on your sun and in opposition, finally at 4 degrees opposing Pluto, we have this absolutely crazy double kite and this new
Wow. Yeah.
basket that's happening. For those who've bought the annual readings, I spoke a lot about this in those. And even because whatever is going to come along at 4 degrees of any sign is going to be triggering these things, but especially in opposition to Neptune here, trining Uranus, we have the moon as a timing device. So whatever's going on the 19th of July, that's my dog's birthday is the 18th of July. So I wonder what's going on in Meta's life. But this is going to be something. This is going to be a stellar event. And again, I have no idea what to say. No idea.
Mm.
You've never really, there's just not ever been a moment where such perfect aspects are being made by the outer planets, by these slower moving planets.
Yeah.
We do get these kinds of basket formations or the cradle formation and kites and things when you get faster moving planets. Like if you've got the moon and Mercury zipping through or the sun or whatever, it can make these things, but they last usually hours or a couple of days at the most, and they're not huge game changers. They might be a unique moment in somebody's life if it's targeting their specific degree points, but this will be, for all of us, this will be something that is absolutely extraordinary. But I do believe it already starts very, very powerfully the moment that Uranus goes into Gemini, because
Gemini.
these, the way that Richard Tarnas described it, the way I always learned astrology was you give a 2 or 3 degree orb, and then, like 20 years ago, Cosmos and Psyche comes out, and Tarnas is saying, no, 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 give it 10, 15 degrees, depending, for the slower planets. And I started to notice in my own life, oh, for sure, like that's, the idea that we need to have it within this really tight orb for something to happen is, you will see results for sure, but at the same time, we don't need to wait. And I think we're in it as soon as Uranus shifts permanently, well, at least for the next 7 years, into Gemini from the 26th of April. So we can think about this as something that is in a long phase of preparation, but also with some added novelty. Um, who knows what this represents? What do you think? What does this look like
Well,
to
I
you?
mean, it's going to be, I mean, there's so much involved in that. It's probably going to be a lot of things that, that some of it will horrify us, that
Yeah.
bad people get away easily with terrible things. There's
Yeah.
definitely going to be some of that. But like we were saying before, the thing is to use it for oneself, because you're not going to stop the World Economic Forum or NATO or whoever doing bad things.
Yeah.
Like you're not that's not within our power. But our own lives, get your chart read and
Yes,
find
yes,
out.
yes. It helps a lot. Yeah, yeah. That's not even a commercial impulse. It's almost like a
Yeah.
psychological necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Find out what you can do with that,
Yeah.
because you definitely will be able to do something quite definite with it.
Mhm.
Everybody's got something at the near enough the beginning of an air or a fire sign, which is going to be positively aspected here.
Yeah,
Or
that's
they'll
the
have an
influence,
angle or a
isn't it?
house cusp or something. Huh?
Positive is the word, isn't it? It's really good to have that sense. And even when you're talking about an opposition like you're having to your sun, Pluto opposing your sun, you can decide it's going to be positive. That's
Mm,
the thing. It's like, okay, I'm working with this. I'm conscious that I'm ready for this new moment. I trust that the timing is divine, and that's what it's like. This is the agenda
mm,
now. I'll work with that. So that's a great way of working with these days.
yeah.
And also the fact that it doesn't have to be specific. It's not like you're going to miss the boat if by the 19th of June or
Yeah.
July you haven't figured it out, but just have a sense, okay, things are starting really, really powerfully in these days, and this is where you can jump in.
Mm, mm,
Also, because there's a sextile from Mars to Saturn, which is also, again, another extraordinary aspect that's creating one of these angles
yeah.
of the kites that is a big part of the unusual, like these, just all of these things lining up in extraordinary ways that they're,
Mm,
Saturn is about 3 arc minutes of a degree from its stationary retrograde point. So Saturn's moving really slow at this point. So much to work with here. And as you said, the
yeah.
bad guys are always going to be doing their bad guy things. So you might as
Yeah,
well
of
just get on
course. I
with it.
mean, the stars don't judge who's good and who's bad,
Yes.
in order,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
just doing their thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
And
good
it's up to
point.
us to do ours.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so you'll have to stay in touch. We'll do more. I'd love to have you back and talk more about these things. I've really, really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I'd love to look at because we're coming to the end of such an era of 80 or 90 years or something
Yeah,
of that extraordinary Saturn, no, Pluto-Neptune sextile
yeah,
that everybody in the world has lived with so much that we're not conscious of it.
yeah,
And we're
true. Yeah.
beginning to move out of it. I would love to do a conversation on that and
Well,
just
let's do that.
explore that more difficult. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, we can find some interesting events
charts.
that we can show people
Mm,
and what that represents. I think that's a great idea. So
mm.
after I come back from my silent retreat, then we'll
Yeah,
do that, and then I will hopefully have a good, fresh, fresh brain and some ideas of what we can explore. I've really enjoyed getting to
yeah,
know
me
you
too.
and having this conversation.
Yeah, we'd be
Um,
talking for 4 hours,
it's
3.5 hours.
crazy, isn't it? It's just, I mean, I could go all day,
Yeah, me too.
talking to you, so that's good. Yeah. Luckily,
Yeah,
we have dogs and animals that are asking
yeah,
for our
need
attention.
tending to.
My dog just pushed the door open. And I'm going to put your details in the description box below this video so people can look at your website and find you to have, you're still consulting? You're still meeting with
I
people?
do, yeah,
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 and you do that online, I guess. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
Well, I
people
do it
can
face to
find.
face as well here in Ireland, but
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I
um,
do have quite a lot of Irish people in the audience, so that's really
all
nice.
right. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So they'll
I
find
mean,
you.
I've advertised you in every group that I'm part of because I think the work that you do is just so important.
Oh, thanks. That's really, really
Yeah,
great.
because it's quite rare. I mean, I was getting pissed off with online astrologers for a long time. And then gradually more original voices started coming out, and then I found
Right.
yours. Yeah.
Well, that it's actually one of the reasons I got into astrology was because personally I was getting such bad readings, and I thought, what is this? Like I knew they were kind of blowing sunshine up my backside, and I thought, I know this is not the life I'm living
Exactly.
here. So
Yeah.
what is this?
Yeah.
So that's what really got me to really focus in on learning for myself because I thought there's an element I'm not
Mm,
seeing something here if everybody's talking
mm,
this way. So
mm.
that is why I want to talk to people in this more, sometimes sounds negative, but I feel it's more real. It's more like
Yeah.
this life is hard. Sometimes people
Yep.
die, things happen,
Mm,
people lose their
mm,
jobs. This is life. And
mm.
if we come at it with a feeling of, well, this is an event in the course of a lifetime,
Yes.
then we're not devastated by it.
Yeah.
We're growing through the difficulty, right? It's the compost,
Yes.
as my teacher
Yeah.
would say.
And it's a limited period of time when things are, when we all go through our crisis times and everything's awful. It is a limited period of time. And
Yeah,
astrology can tell you that. And it's
exactly.
often a great relief just to know that.
Yeah, yeah, this is,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Even a Pluto transit is only 2 years, right?
Mm, mm.
Even Pluto, the worst of them all. Yeah, well, that's great. And as you said earlier, that victimization energy of Neptune in Pisces is something that we can look at and say, okay, we can move away from this
Yeah.
and honor that we've learned so much about what it means to heal, what it means to also be a victim and also not embody that as an identity. And the Aries is our new template. What do I identify with? How do I want to identify
Yeah.
going forward?
Yeah.
So, and so lovely. So,
You too.
I will look forward to our next conversation, which I'm sure there will be one. And I'll put all your details below and people can connect with you there. Okay.
Okay.
So, thanks a million. Bye
Oh,
bye.
thanks to you. Yeah, that was a
Okay.
pleasure.
Great.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.